humans we've been called social animals, right? And the idea is rooted in Aristotle's philosophy that humans uh, love to be in a community rather than in isolation. And what we have seen in the last many years now, I think 4 to 6 years, humans have become social media animal, and that has opened up multiple vulnerabilities. Whether it is celebrities or brands, and if you add this to the equation of CEOs and founders wanting to be celebrities, which of course, to an extent is a great idea, but on the other end, it could be a double-edged sword where they can open multiple channels of vulnerabilities for the brand itself. Now, given this context, what we have seen in the last 6 months alone is mind-boggling. Whether it is the Oyo crisis, whether it is the Zomato crisis, to an extent Swiggy crisis, and then what happened with Ranveer. I think he's continuing to pay the price of, I would say, a mischief which he thought was at the right time, right place. But of course, when things go out in public, you would have that cancel culture. He had a lot of unsubscribers to his very, very famous channel, and he was then debarred by the Supreme Court to be very cautious, if at all he wants to go live. Now, in this context, the cancel culture, you know, where humans have become social media animals, it's a huge challenge for the brands, and of course, it's a bigger challenge for the celebrities. And for the brands, where the CEOs are wanting to play celebrities, it's a much bigger channel. So I have very, very esteemed panelists with me today, people who have managed crisis from day zero and are still, in brands, where the vulnerabilities are always high because the nature of business is such. So to begin with, what we will do is we will just understand and comprehend the cancel culture. And I have a question for you, Akanksha. You've been in the front lines of social media storm. Can you just describe, and please feel free, whatever you don't want to share, uh, how this crisis started and how did you feel in the first 24 hours of the crisis?
Okay, so I was with Bharat Pay before recently joining Swiggy. So spent like about 4.5 years there. So I'm sure most of the people in the room will be aware of the Shnir Grover crisis, and it just happened in front of our eyes. We returned after the New Year. Uh, Luckily for me, I had gone for a couple of days break, and I came back a day prior before this happened. There was a voice clip which went on. Which was posted on a Twitter handle, where they were alleging that our erstwhile founder of Bharat Pay was abusing somebody from Kotak. And the initial 10-12 hours, nothing happened. It's like, when a big thing hits you, don't react. So nothing happened. We just didn't want to accept that anything will happen. So we assumed that, okay, we're not seeing any traction, nothing is going to happen. This video must have gone up around 11, 12 in the morning. Till about 10 in the evening, there were not many views. So we were like, okay, this is cool. I mean, it just died its own death. Why bother? Of course, we did some research in terms of who's there, what is happening, what is the story behind it. But then we stayed shut. Why should we kind of fuel the fire? But suddenly after 10:30, 11 in the night, it just went crazy. I started getting calls from the media, from the top media across the country. What is happening? What is this? Is this Mr. Grover? What is happening? Why? What is he doing? A lot of stuff came our way. Of course, in the middle of the night, we couldn't have responded, so we just stayed shut. Then then the next morning was even crazier because it was all over the internet, all over Twitter. People were just kind of questioning him. That's the time when Shark Tank season 1 had started airing. So he was trending anyways. He was one of the so-called famous founders, popular amongst the people. So bad time, and it went crazily viral on social media. But we decided to hold our fort. We decided to not say anything till we really understand what is behind this. And we of course had to speak to the founder and kind of take a call on what can be said, what cannot be said. As a company, we decided to stay away from this because it wasn't his individual matter, even if it was, because he was wanting to buy some some stocks, and it was an individual matter. So as a company, we decided to kind of keep ourselves away from this. The initial, I'm only talking about the initial problem. So stay away from this, and we let kind of the founder lead from his Twitter handle whatever he wanted to say, where he said that this is not correct, it's not his voice. And while I tried my level best that he should not speak, but he did went out and speak, and then of course it went to multiple rounds of news cycles. And it kind of got escalated in the board, investors, and then there was certain action which was taken. So I think the social storm stayed for at least 4 or 5 days. And then on a Sunday, this happened I think Tuesday or Wednesday. On a Sunday, there was some letter which was leaked, a legal notice which was leaked in the media, which was very clear that there was something which was done. There was proof of it, and hence it went a little more crazy. But again, as a company, we decided to stay away because it was his individual matter. It had a lot of backlash on the brand, but for the initial time, we decided to stay away.
So Himanshu, from a broader view, why do what do you believe, why these backlashes happen and what's in it, the cancel culture?
Look, so social media has given voice to anyone, right? And anyone and everyone. So anyone can just go, and I can just create an account and go and voice my concerns, or I can give and curse anyone on social media, right? So it has given anonymity. I can have a pseudo account and give any, put my thoughts and beliefs there, right? So that's what has given rise to cancel culture. First is anyone can and everyone can come and speak. And secondly, you can hide behind the curtains and, say whatever you want, right? So that has, led to that situation. And second, I think third is a mob mentality. Online mob mentality, right? You have seen physical mob mentality. Online, if someone piles onto a issue, everyone will pile onto that issue, right? So then it becomes like a viral tweet, right? I mean, so many examples. I don't know. Recently, also we have had where we have talk about Ranveer ho gaya. These issues have been happening for long. If you look at I mean, if you look at Bhojpuri movies, there's a lot of vulgar music, right? If you look at old comedians, stand-up comedians, there's a lot of vulgar comedy. Didn't catch fire, but since it was the political situation of the country is such, people caught on to it, right? So I think people can now say anything against anyone. So I think that's social media, and plus I think last thing is algorithm. I think the more controversial a topic, the more engagement you get. So algorithm plays a big role there. And Twitter knows.
Unemployment is also playing a big role?
I don't think unemployment. But yeah, all these factors give it a lot of big plus. There's a lot of misinformation, right? And you can just make up something. I can call, Modi ji is the 7th avatar of. I can say that. I can put it on Twitter, right? No one is stopping me. So So that very fact can, enables me to say anything. So I think
that's so true. And Oyo tried to play God to an extent. It can be very, very challenging. You have to be very, very careful what you say and where you say it. So Akshita, for you, what are the common mistakes or blind spots that make brands vulnerable to these social media stars?
I mean, we spoke about the fact that there's anonymity and I think democratization of voice. But from a brand's perspective, one of the things that I'm seeing very often is just tone-deaf messaging. Not cultural missteps, I mean, it could be good intention, but I think when there are so many minds involved in a project, we need to be sensitive towards people, towards whom our audience is. That's like the whole genesis of communication. Know your target audience. So I would say tone-deaf messaging is definitely one of the lacunas that we all should be really careful of when we're thinking of what messages to put out. And once the crisis happens, how we respond to it is the other blind spot. Sometimes, I mean, you have to say sorry. So, okay, I'm sorry, but lack of empathy, do you have an action plan on how you plan to correct it? I think both are, blind spots that we feel we'll see what happens, and then it ends up in a crisis. Or, we have to immediately react to the situation. So we just go out and say, okay, I'm sorry I said that, or maybe try to cover it up.
You're right, but how immediate is immediate? Because Ranveer, I think, came back in 24 hours. But that was seen as too late, right? And
I mean, I think that's where...
2 hours. At 2 in the morning, he gave that.
Oh, that was 2 hours? Oh. तभी भी late हो गया था.
No, also depends on what is the issue, right? If, for example, we have seen so many guys. There were recently, I think last year, there were two leading banks where the team videos were leaked, where the manager is giving
Yes,
a lot
yes.
of gali, right?
Yeah.
If there you take 2 hours, 24 hours, that is late. You have to immediately do something about it, apologize, but then it also depends on the crisis you have. So I mean, it
So,
depends
Himanshu,
on.
does it also depend on the kind of organization you are? If you're a legacy organization, there are too many intricacies in terms of getting approvals, legal approving
But
stuff.
during
And
crisis, I think everyone has to become fast. Doesn't matter if it's if it's a startup or a legacy organization. If it's a crisis, I think everyone needs to be, because that will happen only if you have a SOP in place. If you don't have an SOP in place, then you will
It's gonna be
end up. Yeah, absolutely.
yes, Sushree, please.
Yeah. So to add on to what Himanshu is saying, I think one of the problems that these crises are just blowing in proportion, and we have no clue, etc., as to which are the material ones, which crises are the material ones to really reply to, and in what duration of time, and which are immaterial and just opinions, right? For example, we can see a lot of things have blown out of proportion. Just to state examples, the Ranveer one. But then, on the other hand, there was the L&T chairman who made such a message, and he represents a very old legacy organization, which is very dependent on its sales force, etc. Has a huge employee base, etc. But nothing really came out of it. So we really don't know on social media which are the things, are opinions material or immaterial, are employee issues or employee or values or not tendering to the organization values or material. I don't think we can ever understand. A lot of factors actually go into place, like the geopolitical conditions, and there are various different agendas that the external environment usually has against these organizations.
That's
sometimes
true.
also.
One thing which may be true is, if you are a star, there are many people who want to bring you down. So SNS, at least people knew about him, but general masses, do they care about him?
Yeah.
Maybe not. But Ranveer, was a star,
Yeah.
and there could be many forces that come into play to bring anybody who has been
Absolutely.
moved into that celebrity cadre very, very quickly.
What I feel that these are see, consumers, public in general, on social media. I mean, we can't really say that they do not know things, right? They're one thing at least that we can say about all of them is they're highly, highly aware and connected. So we really can't, cancel them and their opinion on anything that we say. I think one fundamental aspect of all of this is, and I have seen that across all these examples that have happened in the past 7-8 years, is if the brand or a person is absolutely antagonistic to the values or the authentic nature that they were portraying, and it goes antagonistic to that, it's then that this thing blows up. For
So
example,
true.
we all know that this certain individual was like that all the time. He was just being his authentic self, so he didn't get a lot of backlash, right? But I think brand reputation is the consistent delivery of the same message and the values that you portray over and over again, and I
So
think
true.
people understand that.
Perfect. So once so this was the the context to the cancel culture. But once you're in the midst of the crisis, Himanshu, this one is for you. When a brand is hit by a sudden backlash, what would be the first 24 hours in terms of the action plan?
So one thing is, you should if you have a social media crisis in your hands, right? You should always keep your entire organization informed, because it's on social media. You can't hide it from anyone. From the top to bottom, you need to tell everyone that there's something of this sort is happening, and you need to be aware of it. Secondly, set your expectations correct with your management. There's no magic wand. You just and your crisis
Control
goes away.
karo.
You control karo ho gaya, band karo. Because I have had situations where one of my early organizations, my one of my co-founders wrote something on social media, and it was trending for like days, and now the person is recognized by that social media post. He said, "Band kyun nahi ho raha hai?" I said, "You cannot shut anything, right? So the expectation has to be set." Secondly, you can monitor. You should monitor your situation. You just make sure that there's no misinformation going out. If there's some misinformation is going out, then you should then put a statement ready, send it out. Plus, also depends on the crisis. If it's a crisis, for example, I told about the banks, right? You have to be very quick on your feet and you have to respond. But if it's for example, you have a social media crisis due to your marketing campaign, just weather it out, because you have made a campaign, your brand campaign, and you very well know what are the pitfalls, repercussions of it, right? So just stay. I mean, Pepsi. There was a issue. I think 2017, Kendall Jenner. There was a huge controversy. Nothing came out of it. Just like you just stay shut. You don't have to react anything because people have a very short memory.
And the good thing is,
2 days, 3 days, it will blow over. It will blow over in 2 or 3 days. You don't do anything. Especially if you made for example, I don't remember if you guys, there was a Burger King campaign called "Women Belong to the Kitchen," and it went viral. It was a campaign for women's scholarship for women chefs. But the tagline was that. But now no one remembers it. 3 days max gone. So you don't have to do anything. Just weather it out.
Perfect. So from your perspective, Akanksha, because you've been party to multiple crises, and also crises which have blown out of proportion and have sustained for a long time, and the one you spoke about can emerge, resurface at any moment, right? Whenever the gentleman's name comes into picture. So from your experience, does it make sense for the brand to come out and apologize, or how should they respond?
So I don't think. So when you are fighting somebody who's doesn't have much at stake versus you as a brand, because you as a brand have to be more responsible, and you are like catering to millions of customers. So from that standpoint, I think you have to pick the fights you want to fight, and that's the simple rule we followed. We, of course, I wanted to add to what Himanshu said. We had a very core team in place from day zero. The core team did have the general counsel, the CEO, and a couple of senior leaders, which would help us decide quickly and take a call quickly. And in this situation, especially because there were a lot of things which legal wanted to take a little more stronger view, so we had to go back for any statement as a brand we would put out. We would go back to legal and take their buy-in. So I think it's important that you pick your battles, you pick your fights, because you are catering to millions of customers. You are not out there to just and also don't what I saw in this entire thing was a lot of stuff was just made up. It was not true. There were no and if you start fighting it with, okay, here, no, this is not right, here's my proof, so you will just get lost in it. Anything where you really think it's impacting the business is where you should put a statement out very politely with facts. Otherwise, you should just let it die out, like how Himanshu said. Because
Sorry to interrupt you, but have you ever experienced your competition getting into the game and trying to take advantage of the brand going down?
well, I mean, you can see it on the ground. They will take advantage, because if you are going through a crisis, the competition will, of course, take advantage in the sense that they will go and tell people that, this is not doing well. They'll go and tell your customers it's not doing well. There is a crisis at the top. It was a big crisis because the person who's running the show was being hit, So they will, I mean, and that's very organic for any brand to do it. That will happen, but you have to stay close to your foundation and talk, and that's where your core team makes a lot of difference. If you have a CEO who can come out and just talk and reassure the customers or your merchant partners, whoever it is, it will help, or other stakeholders, it will help you really kind of hold the ground, because such crisis, the kind of crisis that Bharat Pay saw, took a long time to kind of kill.
Okay. So Sushree, for you, in your experience, how would one handle the public emotion? The anger, the calls for boycott, maybe even abusive comments, what you should hide and what you should let be on the platforms.
So I would just structure this answer into two parts. And a very small part of the action statement is reactive. But that 20% of that reactive response that you have to give to that has to come from the communications that you have been taking along a long period of time. That's the only communication that should go out. There should be no reactive response to any individual comment. It has to be something broader, like the broader values of the organization, what we stand for, etc., and what you have been communicating, just to portray that consistency in the thing. And probably if it takes an apology, I feel in a lot of cases, I don't think a public apology ever goes the right way. Ever. So that's
That's
the
very
20% reactionary response. I think a lot of it has to, 80% has to go with that consistency of proactive communication for these things. And to say that, okay, we are the best, or probably we are doing what we are supposed to do here, but we are also humans at the end of the day, right? Let the human angle for brands and for people especially, like you were saying, right? Now the top management really want to be influencers and superstars here. Uh, but what they don't understand is that while you're going to the top and you want to, it necessitates you to be a public figure, it also necessitates the fact that you have to show your human tendencies to them. That's what, and we have been seeing in all our Hindi film cinemas, or be it in all kinds of art that is getting portrayed. Globally, actually, it's been a phenomena that people are actually connecting with you because of your flaws. You can, a brand, a company, same goes for the fact for a brand and a company or an individual also. You have to show a very, a very humble, authentic side of you, and I think people will understand. I truly believe in people's judgment of authenticity, honesty, because as we all are, now we are social media animals, but truly, fundamentally, at a basic fact, I think we all are social animals and we do understand emotions. And I feel uh, as a PR professional, everything is personal. In
No, that's
today's
true,
world.
and while I completely agree with you, apologies may not necessarily work.
Yeah.
But do you think, has Dipinder mastered the art of apologizing?
Absolutely. I think
I think they do work for some people, at least in the startup world I've seen. Right from Mama Earth
Yeah.
to, you've mentioned the name, also to Piyush Bansal, when he was hit by that
Yes.
CFO of CA's crisis, when the Shark Tank episode was aired and he'd said something which went out of context, and he'd put out an apology and just died out.
Yeah, I mean, depends on, correct, and what kind of an perception you have made in the public, right? There's a very famous founder of electric company. I mean, or there are founders who want to showcase that they are like they can say anything and get away, right? There are a couple of founders in the market who
Yeah.
say anything and everything that comes in their head.
So far, they have been able to get away with it.
Not really. I mean, sometimes they get away with it, but now if you keep doing it, then people get used to it. So then it becomes like, okay, he's like this only.
So that works for the brand or against the brand?
Look, we have to separate both the entities, right? So one is the brand, like when they had the crisis, the other is the founder, right? But if the founder is equal to the brand, then the brand takes a toll. The brand takes a toll.
So she mentioned, I think, when it is brand, maybe apologizing is a slightly tricky thing.
tricky thing.
But when it is an individual, then I think, it may make sense to be very swift in acknowledging and apologizing if it so demands.
I think I wanted to give a short example here.
Hanji.
For example, I represent the pharmaceutical industry. Apologies do not work there.
Yeah.
It's medicines that is going into a human's body. It is health. Your loved ones are actually suffering. Apology doesn't work. Action works there. Quality, consistent delivery of services and the right knowledge are so imperative to this business that an apology doesn't work. It's
No,
a
that
zero
makes
error
perfect
business.
sense, yeah.
It's a zero error business, just like airline.
Yeah.
There's no side for apology. It's only action that can change anything and everything to do with any kind of crisis in this industry.
So true. So Akshita, because brands always have their own social media platforms, any learnings, you can share with us with respect to how the platforms need to be managed while the crisis is on.
I think, we spoke about consistent messaging. It speaks volumes that reputation management is not a one activity item. It's something that you build over years, and so is community engagement. And if you're talking about online communities, I think if you nurture them from the beginning, you do have people who come out and support, specifically if the crisis is based on, say, misinformation, or it's just digital vandalism because it's anatomy and all of that. So I feel if we are able to nurture our community, it could be employees, it could be customers. I mean, we hear about fan wars when it comes to influencers, right? These are all communities who have believed in the values you have communicated and the actions you have taken. And I think if you talk about platform management, community management should be one of the things we do from the beginning. And then, of course, listening and monitoring. I think that's something that's really important, to be able to identify early signs of warning. Because coming back to the first question, that's also a lacuna where, we feel, okay, not a big person, what, the tweet will not go viral. We spoke about HUL and Food Farmer the other day. I mean, these are cases where we kind of brush them aside, but that's really what makes the noise. So yeah, that would be.
Sometimes it doesn't take too long. It may not flare up immediately, but
Yeah.
then it can happen at any moment.
Absolutely. So early signs of warning would be one, but essentially I feel community engagement and having some sort of listening and monitoring in place helps quite a lot.
Perfect. So now once the crisis is over, Akanksha, this one is for you. How do you rebuild the trust for the brand?
So I think you start rebuilding it while you continue to build it while you are in the crisis, and then you have to rebuild it. I think you have to have a person, maybe ideally the CEO or somebody senior, who goes out there and kind of keeps reinforcing what is the company's commitment, what is the company focused at, keeping it away from the crisis or the challenge. Of course, if it's a brand related crisis and not an individual related crisis, it's good to kind of close that. It's always good to close the deal there. But if you are putting the person out there as a spokesperson, he should talk more in terms of what is the path for the future, what we want to do. And of course, get yours, like she said very rightly, build a community, get people. Like for Bharat Pay, that was merchants. For another brand could be consumers. Get them to speak about the experiences. Get them to talk about how you've impacted their lives. That kind of own media will work really well, because you're going to build equity for the brand, which will really touch people at the level you really want to touch, like your merchants, your consumers. So I think that is something you should run as a parallel and start talking about the growth of your brand, the growth story of your brand. Don't go overboard. Don't go like, okay, now the crisis is over, let's everybody get into it. Build it slowly. But get a consistent person to be out there, talk about the brand, talk about the growth, how you are progressing, and then of course build these channels separately to kind of have a more robust community who will rally behind you.
Got it. Just a very tactical question for you, Akanksha, from a media standpoint. Because media is going to keep coming back to the same question. So how do you, manage and navigate and negotiate those situations?
See, media will come back till it's hot. After a certain point in time, they will of course move away when they don't find anything new. So they will have to move on, because they also want stories. And I think in crisis, just to add to this, and in crisis you have to have some media friends who are there to kind of put your story out. Your media relations really work to build or manage a crisis in a better way, is how I will put
And you
it.
think, today media has enough influence to also influence the social media?
Of course. They do, because they will put on social media, and without naming media
Yeah.
friends of mine, they have thousands and tens of thousands of followers. So if they put out something incorrect, I'm spending the rest of the day trying to solve that through other channels. So even a tweet can make a lot of difference, and we've seen it in the crisis at Bharat Pay, that the tweet by a journalist would kind of change the narrative for the day. So social media plays a lot of important role, and of course they also, if they do stories, it's also kind of channelized through the brand handles of the media house. So that also adds to it.
Perfect. Yeah, Anshu, you want to say something?
No, I'm just saying, I mean, to rebuild. I mean, also I'll want to, like to reiterate. At the end of the day, again, it's a thing of 3-4 days. You'll have a tough thing, tough spot. But then again, I remember there were crises in Balenciaga. There was a crisis in Dolce & Gabbana. There was a crisis at Tommy Hilfiger founder said, "I don't make clothes for Indian masses, Asian masses, right?" Still now they are the most sought after brands. Balenciaga or Dolce & Gabbana, still people didn't stop buying. It happened for 3 days. People went on social media. People wrote about it. Then they forgot. So 4-5 days, people have very short memories. It'll blow over.
And
you have done something horrifically wrong, which stays with you for the rest of your life.
Any example you have for that?
There's so many which people, I don't know.
I don't want to name the brand.
There was a famous brand which is still, I think, under scrutiny. One of famous Ayurvedic brands, which is still it's in the stock market. They still
Yeah.
haven't got back that they were very sought after. Everyone was using it. They went through a lot of issues. Plus, there were a lot of regulatory issues that they
Yeah.
faced, right? And then Supreme Court gave them a rap. Then there were a lot of issues at the quality factor, right? And on social media, people wrote about it. And now still, I think it'll take them a long time to
So
come
they
back.
did not learn from their
Yeah, yeah.
mistakes, and they just kept compounding
Correct.
those mistakes.
Correct. Plus, so that. Correct.
Perfect. So, Sushree, from a preventive measures point of view, what do you think? How should a brand prepare themselves from a social media crisis situation, which is not a question of whether it will happen or not. It's only when will it happen.
Yeah, I think social media crisis is also seen the same as any kind of crisis that can come for an organization. I mean, I think it's getting paid the same kind of attention that we will pay to a employee-generated crisis or a organization fundamental asset crisis, etc. In crisis management, communication, I think we do have a toolkit, like the first panel was also alluding to today. We do have a toolkit ready. Sometimes the toolkit is only towards re-emphasizing on the positive sides of the brand, the values of the brand, what exactly do we stand for, and a lot of it, one key fundamental where people usually I see go wrong in giving out these tone-deaf communications, like you were saying, is the strategy and the tactical plan for crisis communication never really goes hand in hand. Because it's a reactionary measure to a crisis that has happened, and you have to just respond to it within 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever the timeline suggests for you, depending on the business you are in. It's always reactionary, and therefore it never really collates to the communication strategy that you have developed for the brand or for the company or for the conglomerate as a whole. And if it's a global business, then the problems are even higher.
Yeah.
Do you follow the global communication or you follow your country communications, etc.? So I really feel that the tactical plan, the communication for a crisis resolution, be it for a longer period of time or for that event per se, has to flow from the strategy, and the strategy doesn't change much. I will still recommend that we talk about values, we do proactive action which suggests that the brand follows and believes in a certain set of actions to the communities and what it does for those communities. I think proactive measure, consistency in communication, being authentic in the communication that you develop, and if authenticity is the one that you are trying to say, then immediate communication and resolution of that crisis,
That's what
not
really matters.
just communication per se, should be the key. I mean, that's the actionable part of a crisis resolution.
That's very fair.
Just putting out
sorry.
a communication on social media actually isn't a resolution, right? It's for us PR communicate professionals, but yeah, it's not action really.
So true. Akanksha, I'm sure, after going through so many instances of crisis, you would have developed a special toolkit. Would you like to share some aspects of it?
I so wish I had a toolkit and it would have covered any and every crisis in the world, but unfortunately that's not true. I mean, there is a toolkit which you improvise on.
Yeah.
But if you want, I think Himanshu's covered most of it. You have to, most important is to have your core team. You should know. It's not like now crisis is over, let's forget about it. I mean, of course, I'm assuming Bharat Pay is still following it, but after the crisis was over, also the majority of it, we still had our toolkit in place, because there were days when something will happen, something will get posted, and the same team will get activated. We had a clear, process in place to do, because we had to respond in 10 minutes at 10 in the night or 11 in the night. That's the standard. I mean, that's also being nice to us. So you are used to it. So then we put that, so your toolkit, most importantly, is to have the team in place, which is hands-on, which can close things quickly. That's very important. Also, it's always recommended that you should have all the scenarios in place, have your statements ready. But I feel that while that's a good thing to do, but there will be more that will come your way which you've not planned for.
So there's one scenario, which is very unique these days, where celebrity CEOs may not listen to anybody within the ecosystem. So how do you then deal with the situation? You're only just making sure, that you're backing up and covering up for some of the mess which has been created by a person who's just not listening to anybody.
Yes, I mean it's a challenge. I think a lot of senior people in the industry also I talk to, I won't name brands, but referring to celebrity founders who don't
Yeah.
listen. So I think, I mean, you can give as much sense as you can. I think the best way to work with such people ideally may take a long time is to win their trust. If they think that you are the person who will tell you the right thing, they may be nice to you and come to you when they mess up, but or may come to you when they are wanting to put something out, like really wanting to put something on, check with you, and they will listen to you. So you have to, I think what works is maybe you win their trust, and then the chances are lower that it will happen, but there's no guarantee.
You can
If
just
they want
pray
to
for
put-
that, right?
No, they will not listen to. I mean, I hope they do. Really hope they do
Yeah,
listen
that's
to the
divinity.
comms person. But that's again divine. But majority of times, or 99.999% of times, they're not listen because they have they're like an automatic gun on the social media, right? They will write anything and everything that comes in their head. So I mean, we have seen enough and more startup founders writing whatever they want, and you cannot stop them. They want to write, they will write. The only thing is you just have to get used to it. How the person is, and he's gonna be reacting this way.
So how do you prepare for a founder like this? If you are the custodian of the brand and you have a founder like this.
First of all, develop a thick skin in life.
Okay.
If you want to win crisis comms or PR, thick skin. People will come and say anything and everything to you about you or your brand. You just have to take it in your stride. That's one, right? Number two, have accountability. At least your founder has said something. If he has actually said something wrong, at least the founder should have that accountability, or you should at least tell them to apologize. For example, there was I think 2021 or 22, Satya Nadella had said something about gender pay gap.
Yeah.
Immediately he came and apologized, and it was him as an individual who's apologized, right? So then people take it in the right manner, right? That's what you have to do. I think thirdly, what the founders need to also understand is there's a difference between positive criticism and there's and mob mentality. For example, there was recently, I think this year only, 2024 only, there was a very famous case where a comedian wrote something about an electric car company. The founder could have reacted in a very different way, saying that, okay, could be harsh, but we are working towards solving that issue rather than piling onto it, right? So you have to also hold on to your horses. And as a brand custodian, you cannot do anything. I mean, I will not expect, the comms team to pull a rabbit out of the hat and something magical will happen, because that is how the brand is going to be seen as because of the founder, and you have to be used to it. I mean, there's
So
no
true.
amount of statements which will undo the damage.
So
I
true.
think if it's a listed company, it may work if they see the stock price is going down. So maybe
Good.
possibly.
And it has
You
happened.
show them the-
No, it has happened.
It has happened, but
because the regulatory company
Yes.
has pulled them up also
yeah.
recently.
So I think it may just help, but maybe I think you just give them this is what will happen, and then let them be. Like he said very rightly, we can't do beyond that.
Yeah, we
When they
can't.
see it happen, maybe one day they will understand. I mean, because you
yeah,
can't control
hopefully
them.
because over a period of time they've just developed a culture that they are larger than life, and whatever they say is gospel. So some people will love it, some people will hate it, but they will not ignore them. And I think this is the feed on the fact that nobody can ignore them.
I think it's very addictive, for even
Yes.
for people like us who may not have like millions of followers. It's addictive, right?
It's addictive.
I mean, at least I go and see how many likes I got. So I think they have like millions of followers. So they get used to that fame. So for them, they have to put a view out, and then they build a public personality that bothers them more than possibly the brand at large. That's where we face the challenge.
So true. Sushree, you're lucky. You're in a very highly regulated industry where founders can perhaps not go berserk.
Yeah, I think all the companies really that I work for are professionally managed organizations, like 100%. So it helps because PR be it in media or social media, are actually seen as verticals of business. Where you do not just come out with a recipe of how to handle a crisis. There's a process of handling a crisis. There's a certain amount of information that can go out, and the communication is inside a boundary, and it works. It's always worked, and whatever goes in, adding up to it comes from the creative people, etc. So yeah, it really helps when it's a professionally managed organization. I mean, I've never really experienced, how it goes when a person
I'm sure
becomes
even
more
that's
stronger.
a professionally managed organization, but it's the
When the
how
person
do you,
becomes more bigger than the brand.
the person could be bigger than the
Yeah.
brand, or the personal brand may be more important than the brand
Or more
itself.
influential or more exposed
Yeah.
than the brand itself.
Yeah. So Akshita, for you, given that this is the scenario, what's your prescription for the leaders and perhaps the kind of celebrities we have in the ecosystem today? Whether they should be living in fear of offending the audience, or they should be playing a even more authentic and responsible role as leaders.
I mean, I'll talk about people who are open to listening. I mean, we've already established that if they are not ready to listen, we can't do much. But at least, like, I've been very fortunate working with CXOs who, allow me to at least give an opinion on what or how potentially their personal brand could look like. And for people like those I've seen, they have their moments of faux pas, because obviously, I mean, it's a very high standard that you'll never make a mistake. For example, if I were to take an example of Mr. Murthy, we have always looked up to him and put him up on a pedestal, and then he made a statement, though however it panned out later. But the point is that if there is a mistake,
I know time's up, but yeah, mic band kar diya.
but I think, I think the intent reflects more than the words at that point. And be the example of, Ms. Bhavish Agrawal that we spoke about, or anybody else, as long as there's a mistake, but if you're able to communicate, convey the genuine apology behind it, or actually come up with an action plan. I love when brands or individuals respond with, okay, this is the mistake that happened, but this is what we're going to do. And I'll just take a minute. I came across an article very recently. So one of the smartwatch manufacturers had a typo on their smartwatch. So instead of saying made in India, it said MEDA in India. So MEDA instead of MADE. And the CEO came out and he responded saying that this typo has happened, which makes it a limited edition. So if you want to keep the watch, because we will never make this mistake ever again. Or if you want to return, we'll take it back and give you a 30% discount. So I think that, really just, because obviously this is very factual information that there has been an error.
That's very clever.
So
Yeah,
sense
I
of
think I loved
humor
it.
always works. I think this happened with Mokobara as well, right?
Yes.
So they
So,
were
absolutely.
flocked
So,
for.
you can
Yes.
come out, apologize if there is a mistake or if there is an error, or you counter it with facts where possible.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's where I think we as business critical functions, you mentioned about PR being a part of the business, where to respond, how much to respond, do we need to respond? These are, sensibilities that sort of come up in the moment, and you cannot
So
foresee
true.
everything.
Perfect. So thank you so very much. Just to sum it up, and if you have any other points, you can feel free to add. When we're dealing with social media crisis, online reputation, I think what really matters is the speed which we comprehend the situation, the speed with which we are able to adhere to the processes of engaging with the situation, and the eventual response we make to the public. Right. Second is with respect to the fact that brands and celebrities have to function like humans, because we are at the end of the day dealing with humans. So you have to be empathetic, you have to be very honest, and you have to have the humilities in place before you even respond to the ecosystem. Uh, couldn't emphasize more, Akanksha, after dealing with so many situations. You have to be prepared. You have to be over prepared for a situation, because there could be a new situation which will come tomorrow and you would have never imagined. And over preparedness is the only way you could perhaps salvage it the best, right? And then learn and evolve. We don't have to necessarily learn from what crisis we have gone through, but I think understanding the entire ecosystem from a crisis perspective, the response perspective, and how the consumers and the stakeholders are behaving socially, I think that learning has to come in very, very frequently so that we are able to manage crisis which comes on our hand very, very effectively and efficiently. But thanks for your time. It was a pleasure. I hope people had something good to take from this conversation.